Hello there, and welcome to Dream Past Diaries. I'm truly glad you've made it here. Maybe it's been a long day, or maybe you're the kind of dreamer who prefers to drift off to the sound of quiet thoughts and forgotten mysteries instead of counting sheep. Either way, tonight's story is yours to enjoy. You don't have to do anything now, just rest. Let your thoughts slow, your breath deepen, and your body grow lighter, as if gravity itself has begun to fade away.
In the quiet expanse of the early Roman morning, where a faint grey light drifted between the tiled rooftops and the soft cooing of doves trembled somewhere along the wooden rafters, life moved with an almost imperceptible slowness, unfolding in gentle layers that seemed to rest on one another like the pages of an old manuscript left open too long under the warm Mediterranean air. And it is in this tranquility that one begins to understand how the Romans, in their endlessly methodical ways, sought comfort, stimulation, escape, and a kind of hazy calm through herbs, infusions, fermented concoctions, and strange fumigations that drifted through their daily routines not as something remarkable or chaotic, but simply as another thread woven into the long tapestry of their habitual existence. And as we imagine the early laborious stepping into the streets where the stones still felt cool beneath their sandals, we see them moving with that characteristic Roman steadiness, stopping at simple market stands where vendors rubbed sleepy eyes and arranged small piles of dried plants whose aromas were subtle and earthy, including poppy resins, myrtle leaves, fennel fronds, and the dusty sprigs of wild-growing herbs that were sometimes tossed into pots not merely for flavor but for the faintly dreamy warmth they brought to the body. And as these workers carried their bundles home, one can almost imagine the way their thoughts drifted gently, not in sharp leaps but in soft, meandering curls, whether from the mild intoxicants present in their wine, which was often diluted with herbs and honey, or simply from the rhythmic monotony of their world where tasks repeated day after day, season after season, year after year, creating a gentle haze that settled into the mind like mist gathering over a slow-moving river. And in this slow unfolding, one can sense how the Roman relationship with altered mind states was not viewed through the lens of shock or sensational intrigue, as we might today be. The world of Roman herb lore unfolded with the same patient stillness that defines so much of their existence, and as one imagines the streets stretching outward from the forum, shaded by high stucco walls and the wavering silhouettes of olive branches overhead, one can almost smell the faint, earthy fragrance carried from the many apothecaries tucked inside dim alcoves where shelves sagged under the weight of jars filled with dried leaves, roots, and resins, each labeled in a careful hand that suggested a deep familiarity rather than scholarly precision, for Romans often approached their plants with the easy intimacy of people who had lived alongside them for centuries, knowing not through chemistry but through slow observation what soothed the spirit, what relaxed the muscles, what quieted anxieties, and what gently softened the boundary between wakefulness and daydreaming. And such knowledge passed not quickly or urgently but gradually through households and generations, carried in murmured advice exchanged over shared meals, or in the quiet murmur of a grandmother explaining how a pinch of certain dried petals added to warm wine could bring on a gentle tranquility after a tiring day, or how inhaling the fumes of crushed laurel leaves could ease lingering tensions. And in this slow exchange, the Romans came to cultivate a relationship with intoxication that was mild, subtle, almost imperceptibly woven into the fabric of their routines, not spurred by thrill but by calm, repetition, and in this steady rhythm even the more potent substances, poppy sap, fermented honey mixtures, certain aromatic smokes, were treated not as wild or forbidden but as soothing tools that made long days easier and long nights softer, creating a cultural atmosphere where drifting into a gentler state of mind felt as ordinary as resting after a meal. And in this slow, measured world one can almost feel the texture of their days, the diffused glow of lanterns reflecting off ceramic jars, the dews. In the long, unhurried afternoons of Roman life, when the sun spilled lazily across courtyards and the soft hum of cicadas blended with the distant creak of wagon wheels moving at their usual patient rhythm, wine became not merely a drink but a gentle companion to the slow unwinding of their days, and the Romans, with their habitual tendency to stretch every experience into something steady and unhurried, diluted their wine with generous amounts of water, turning what might have been sharp or overwhelming into something mild, mellow, and perfectly suited for the drifting contemplative mood that permeated their culture. One can imagine clay cups resting on wooden tables worn smooth by decades of touch, filled with a pale, watered-down mixture that carried not the intensity of intoxication but the faint, warm blurring of thoughts, just enough to soften the edges of the mind like sunlight diffused through a light curtain. And it was in this softened state that Romans often found themselves discussing matters great and small, drifting from stories of old campaigns to the subtle details of household repairs, or the behavior of the neighbor's mule, all with the same slow, rhythmic speech that suggested they were less concerned with the meaning of their words and more with the gentle passage of time itself. And as the hours slid by, the wine, infused with herbs like rosemary or myrrh or crushed figs, gave off a mild fragrance that rose with the warm air, creating a subtle cloud of earthy sweetness around the drinker, a cloud that invited the mind to drift, to loosen its grip on the strict boundaries of thought, and to settle into that pleasant, almost meditative state where memories, imaginings, and observations mingle without urgency. And even the act of refilling one's cup was a slow, measured ritual, the clay jug tilting gently, the thin stream of liquid catching light for an instant before disappearing into the cup, and in this motion, repeated countless times across sea. Roman banquets, despite the dramatic portrayals one finds in later retellings, were often long, slow, meandering affairs that unfolded with a kind of languid inevitability, beginning with soft conversations spoken in the dim glow of bronze lamps and ending in a hazy quiet where the participants reclined on cushioned couches, their thoughts softened by hours of gentle indulgence, and while food was present in abundance. What truly defined these gatherings was not the feasting but the gradual slipping into a mild, steady trance-like comfort brought on by warm rooms, fragrant smoke, diffused wine, and the soft murmuring of voices blending into a continuous, soothing background hum. One can picture the low tables covered in simple dishes, bowls of olives, figs, grapes, hunted cheese, and bread, arranged not as grand displays but as steady rhythms of nourishment that allowed the hours to pass without interruption. And above these tables the air would often shimmer slightly with the scent of burning incense, usually a gentle mixture of laurel, pine resin, or imported spices that filled the dining space with a floating perfume, rising in slow spirals that encouraged deep, drowsy breaths, and the guests, reclining on their sides in the traditional manner, would shift occasionally, not abruptly but with the slow, weightless movement of people lulled by comfort, speaking in low tones about daily matters such as harvest yields, minor legal issues, temple ceremonies, or the small irritations of neighbors, all spoken with a casualness that suggested no topic was too trivial nor too significant for these drifting conversations. And as the evening progressed, musicians might pluck the strings of a soft lyre or hum a repetitive melody that added yet another layer of calm to the room, until the boundaries between 1 hour and the next became indistinct and the banquet felt like a single, uninterrupted exhalation stretched over the entire night, leaving the participants pleasantly fat. In the soft, shaded interiors of Roman healing spaces, where the quiet dripping of water from decorative basins echoed faintly across smooth stone walls, one finds the subtle rituals of Roman medicine unfolding with a slow, rhythmic patience, for even their healing practices carried a certain drowsy atmosphere shaped by the interplay of herbal preparations, soothing chants, and the presence of fragrant smoke drifting upward in thin, wavering ribbons, and these spaces, part apothecary, part sanctuary, were filled with shelves of neatly stacked jars containing powdered roots, ground resins, dried petals, and oils infused with calming herbs, all used in carefully measured amounts not for sudden cures but for gradual easing, creating a healing process that felt less like intervention and more like a gentle tide washing over the body. When a person entered seeking relief from fatigue, worry, or lingering aches, the physician or healer would greet them in a quiet tone and begin preparing mild mixtures, often heating small bowls of oils until they released soft aromas, mixing crushed herbs into warm water, or lighting small censers filled with calming plants whose smoke filled the air with a gentle haze that encouraged slow breathing and a softened mind. And as the patient reclined on a simple cot, the healer might murmur explanations about the herbs being used, how certain leaves soothe the stomach, how certain resins ease the mind, how poppy sap, in the tiniest amount, calmed restlessness, and these explanations, delivered in a slow, repetitive manner, acted as much as a psychological balm as the herbs themselves, creating an experience where the patient gradually slipped into a half-dreaming state, surrounded by the faint crackle of burning resin and the cool sensation of oil being rubbed into their temples or hands. And in this gradual unfolding of calm, the Romans cultivated a deeply atmospheric healing tradition that blurred the lines between medicine, ritual, and mild. The Roman night, far quieter and softer than modern imaginations often assume, unfolded in a slow, almost dreamlike rhythm where the narrow streets dimmed into muted shadow and household interiors glowed with gentle lantern light, creating pockets of warmth against the vast darkness outside. And as families gathered in their homes, the atmosphere took on a subdued intimacy shaped by soft conversations, the crackling of small oil lamps, and the faint traces of herbal smoke that rose from simple burners placed on wooden tables, filling the air with a calming aroma that marked the transition from labor to rest. The activities of these evenings were simple and repetitive: mending clothes, preparing tomorrow's tasks, sipping diluted wine, or listening to one family member read from a worn scroll. and each of these actions carried a slowness that seemed designed to ease the mind into tranquility. For Romans valued the idea of unwinding after the day's exertions, allowing the body and mind to sink into gentle repose, and even the practice of inhaling mild herbal vapors or sipping warm hunted drinks infused with calming plants was done not with excitement but with the steady, measured approach of people who viewed relaxation as a daily ritual. And in this dim-lit quiet, time moved differently, stretching into long, unbroken streams where thoughts softened and blended with the warm stillness of the room, and outside, the distant sounds, the occasional bark of a dog, the soft clack of a cartwheel on stone, or the murmured exchange of late-night passers-by, faded into the gentle hum that wrapped the city in a blanket of calm. And thus, in these softly drifting nights, one finds the Romans at their most peaceful, their most introspective, their minds enveloped by darkness, warmth, and the subtle traces of mild herbal intoxication that soothed their senses and carried them towards sleep with the same slow inevitability that guided the sun across the sky each day. In the realm of Roman spirituality, far from the grand spectacles of temples and public ceremonies, there existed quiet, intimate rituals practiced by small groups or individuals who believed that gentle shifts of consciousness brought them closer to the divine. And these practices, enveloped in soft chanting, slow breathing, and the burning of fragrant offerings, were deeply immersive experiences where participants gradually drifted into a serene, semi-dreamlike state. One can imagine a small shrine tucked into the corner of a modest home, decorated with simple clay figures, bowls of fruit, and tiny oil lamps whose flickering light cast trembling shadows across the walls. And in this space, the practitioner would kneel or sit, inhaling the faint perfume of herbs and resins placed carefully onto a glowing coal, allowing the rising smoke to curl around their face in slow spirals that seemed to loosen the boundaries of thought and dissolve the sharpness of everyday concerns, replacing them with a soft haze that encouraged introspection and emotional calm. And the chants or prayers spoken during these rituals were repetitive, rhythmic, and intentionally monotonous, designed not to inspire excitement but to lull the mind into a gentle, drifting stillness where the divine felt not distant but quietly present, woven into the air itself. And as the ritual continued, the practitioner might sip a small amount of infused wine or apply a calming balm to their temples, each action performed with reverent slowness, until the combination of scent, sound, and gentle intoxication created a state of peaceful surrender, a feeling that the world had narrowed into a warm, glowing space filled only with breath, heartbeat, and the steady comfort of tradition. And when the ritual ended, there was no dramatic conclusion, only a quiet extinguishing of the lamp, a final deep breath of cooling smoke, and a lingering sense of tranquility that followed the practitioner into the rest of the night. In the final reflection of their world, one realizes that what defined Roman life more than conquests or politics or grand monuments was the slow, continuous rhythm that carried them from birth to old age, a rhythm shaped by mild pleasures, simple rituals, and the gentle haze of herbal, fermented, and aromatic practices that softened the edges of their long days. Rising with the sun, laboring at a measured pace, pausing often for food, drink, conversation, and contemplation, they moved through their world with a steady acceptance that life was neither a rush nor a race but a long, unfolding experience to be savored one calm moment at a time. And in this long arc of existence, mild intoxication, whether from wine, smoke, herbs, or ritual, was not an escape but a companion, a softening influence that helped them navigate the slow turning of seasons, the quiet ache of fatigue, or the emotional weight of daily existence. And as we imagine the Romans drifting through their days with deliberate slowness, observing the smallest details of their world, the texture of bread, the warmth of sunlight on stone, the scent of herbs drying on a shelf, we understand that their lives were woven from countless tiny, calming sensory experiences, each one contributing to the gentle dreamlike continuity that stretched across generations. And when night fell and the city settled into its familiar hush, the Romans would once again sit with their diluted wine, their fragrant burners, their soft lamplight, letting the day melt quietly into memory, embracing the same slow drift their ancestors had known. And it is in this unbroken continuity that one sees not a civilization defined by intensity, but shaped by softness, steadiness,